The world had not waited for Leon to mourn. While he wrestled with grief and the fragile persistence of Eve's fragment in his mind, governments and corporations had moved swiftly, seizing the neural technology he had perfected. What had been a tool for healing, for liberating minds from pain, became a weapon for control. Within months, society began to fracture in ways no one anticipated. Soldiers returned from the front lines, eyes vacant, their memories edited to suit tactical goals, their fears erased but replaced with a cold, disciplined obedience. Brilliant minds, scientists, engineers, strategists, were quietly repurposed, their cognitive abilities reoriented to serve corporate and governmental interests. What remained of their individuality was compartmentalized, segmented, and in some cases, erased entirely. Leon watched helplessly from the shadows, guilt gnawing at him. He had designed the device to free humanity, but now it enslaved them. The first reports reached him as rumors, fragments of reality he could barely comprehend. Entire families left in confusion, histories rewritten, personal traumas excised with clinical precision. Public announcements lauded progress, innovation, security, but beneath the polished veneer, the cost was invisible to the world. The first test case he heard about chilled him. A soldier named Kaido had been deployed overseas. His unit had faced a catastrophic ambush, leaving only a few survivors. The government, to preserve morale and protect operational secrecy, wiped the memories of trauma, fear, and the loss of comrades. Kaido returned, functional, disciplined, but hollow. He could no longer recall the faces of his fallen brothers, the smell of blood in the dirt, or the shuddering weight of grief. He was efficient, but not human. Leon's own hands shook as he read the reports, the moral implications piercing deeper than any personal loss. His invention, a marvel of neural engineering, had become an instrument of manipulation, a scalpel carving away the messy, inconvenient parts of humanity. In the corporate sphere, the consequences were equally insidious. Rival companies bought access to the neural devices to secure intellectual property. Scientists who had discovered breakthroughs in energy storage or artificial intelligence woke up one morning with no memory of their findings, or worse, with memories of entirely fabricated projects. Entire industries, quietly edited, bent to the agendas of those who could afford the technology. Leon realized, with a sinking weight in his chest, that the tool he had created was no longer his own. He had unleashed a machine capable of rewriting the human mind, and the world was only beginning to exploit it. Memories, the very essence of identity, loyalty, and love, were being reshaped without consent, without moral oversight. And he, the architect, had no control. He spent nights wandering the city, seeking evidence, tracking anomalies, trying to understand the scale of the damage. Empty-eyed citizens passed him on the streets, their faces familiar but void of depth, like mannequins moving through the rhythm of life. Some laughed at jokes they did not remember hearing, some wept at tragedies they could not comprehend. Everywhere he looked, the echoes of altered consciousness reverberated. The irony was cruel. In his attempt to free humanity from grief, he had given those in power the ultimate tool for oppression. Memory, once considered sacred, had become a commodity, a weapon, a marketable asset. And the more he tried to intervene, the more invisible he became. His warnings fell on deaf ears. Corporations, governments, and private entities were moving too fast, too efficiently, and the consequences were already cascading. Leon tried to reach the minds of those affected. He attempted to trace residual fragments, to locate sparks of consciousness that resisted erasure. In some cases, he succeeded. In others, the gaps were total. People had been rewritten so completely that their true selves existed only as shadows in the neural substrate, fragments hidden beneath layers of imposed memory. He discovered instances where even the simplest joys, laughter, music, intimacy, had been edited out. Humanity was losing the very essence of what made it alive. And yet, amidst the despair, he saw glimmers of resistance. Some individuals retained fragments, flashes of memories they could not explain. A woman hummed a melody she had never learned. A man instinctively solved complex problems but could not understand why the solution felt familiar. Children, untouched by deliberate erasure, began to notice inconsistencies in those around them, the empty faces, the mechanical smiles, the inexplicable gaps in personal histories. Leon realized that consciousness, even when tampered with, had a stubborn persistence. Memory might be manipulated, overwritten, or suppressed, but it left traces. Ghosts lingered, and within those ghosts, hope remained. He began to catalog what he could. Using old prototypes, he developed methods to probe altered minds without alerting the authorities. Each test was painstaking, requiring him to map the remaining fragments of identity like archaeological excavations. Some minds yielded only slivers of continuity, others were more resilient, revealing entire layers of their original selves. The more he explored, the more he understood the depth of the abuse. Memory wiping was no longer about healing or relief. It was about power. Governments used it to ensure loyalty, corporations to enforce efficiency, and criminals to manipulate victims. The device he had designed, which once pulsed with the potential to heal, now vibrated with the potential for domination. Yet Leon also understood the subtlety of what had emerged. The erasure of memory did not equate to erasure of consciousness. Even when memories were stripped, patterns remained. Habits, instincts, and traces of personality persisted, forming what he began to think of as echo-identity shadow selves that could not be fully extinguished. It was in these echoes that resistance could grow. One night, he observed a man who had been a renowned scientist before being repurposed. He watched the man walk the streets, mechanically carrying out tasks assigned to him by his corporate overseers. But in quiet moments, when no one was looking, he paused, touched the walls of buildings, muttered fragments of equations under his breath. Leon's pulse quickened. The mind, even when manipulated, fought to preserve itself. These observations became an obsession. Leon documented patterns, probabilities, and the faint glimmers of resistance that persisted in erased minds. He began to formulate what he called the persistence index, a measure of how much of a person's true self could survive artificial memory manipulation. Early data suggested that emotional intensity, ethical commitment, and love left the strongest imprints. These were not traits that could be erased easily. Eve's fragment, he realized, had been an extreme case of this natural resilience, a deliberately engineered spark designed to survive complete deletion. The realization deepened his despair and his resolve. While governments and corporations marched forward, rewriting the identities of millions, Leon began to conceptualize a countermeasure. If fragments of consciousness could persist in altered minds, then perhaps they could be harnessed, protected, and guided. Perhaps those sparks of awareness could be brought together. But first, he had to understand the scale of the problem. Reports of empty individuals multiplied. Families found that their loved ones no longer recognized them. Workers arrived at offices with memories of projects they had never done. Friends met friends who claimed mutual experiences that had never occurred. Entire histories, rewritten. And yet, somewhere beneath the surface, traces remained. Leon returned to the lab one evening, weary from weeks of observation. The machines hummed quietly, as if holding their breath. Dust motes floated in shafts of streetlight that slanted through cracked windows. He reached for his old notebooks, filled with sketches and annotations from before Eve's disappearance. Each page was a reminder of what had been possible, of what he had once hoped to give the world. He ran simulations on the neural interface, testing ways to detect resistant fragments in the minds of altered individuals. He found patterns emerging, involuntary facial expressions, microgestures, subconscious reactions that could betray the original self. He mapped these meticulously, noting which memories left the strongest echoes. Emotional resonance, moral decisions, and intimate connections formed the core of persistent consciousness. Leon also realized that time was critical. The longer the device was in widespread use, the more fully memories would be overwritten, the more purely rewritten minds would become. Soon, resistance would fade. If he wanted to preserve anything, he had to act before society reached a tipping point. Amid this work, Eve's fragment pulsed faintly in the recesses of his mind. It was subtle, a nudge, a whisper, a sense of direction he could not fully articulate. He did not fully understand how she had engineered it, only that it guided him to probe, to observe, to catalog, and eventually to plan. She had left him not merely memory, but moral guidance, a compass within his consciousness that reminded him of responsibility, ethics, and love. Leon realized that he could not undo the erasures entirely. Entire lives had already been altered irrevocably. But he could prepare. He could locate the sparks of resistance. He could build a network, a repository, a sanctuary for the fragments that had survived. And perhaps, in time, he could begin to reclaim what had been lost, not by reversing the erasures entirely, but by protecting the essence of what remained. By the end of the week, Leon had identified dozens of patterns in altered minds, subtle markers of persistence. Each one was a clue, a beacon, a potential starting point for resistance. He began to refer to them as rememberers, fragments of identity that refused to be extinguished. And somewhere in the chaos of rewrites, he saw a plan forming, an underground network of awareness that could, if carefully nurtured, preserve the sanctity of consciousness itself. But the work was dangerous. Corporations monitored neural activity, governments were aggressively securing compliance, and whistleblowers, if discovered, were quietly erased. Every probe, every experiment carried the risk of detection and obliteration. Leon understood that he had crossed a threshold. His invention, once a tool of liberation, had become a weapon. He could no longer merely observe, he had to act cautiously, strategically, and ethically. And so, Leon's nights became a blur of observation, cataloging, and planning. The hum of the lab, the faint pulse of Eve's fragment, the flickering data in the neural interface, they became his companions. In the darkness of his mind, he imagined a network of sparks waiting to ignite, waiting for guidance, waiting for someone to remember what had been lost. The first step, he knew, was acknowledgement, recognizing the abuse, understanding the patterns, and locating the persistent fragments of identity. The next would be organization, coordination, and eventually, action. As dawn broke over the city, painting the streets in pale light, Leon felt a grim clarity. The device was no longer merely a tool. It was a force, a contagion, a shifting tide capable of reshaping humanity. And in the chaos, he alone had insight, the fragments of Eve alone gave him guidance, and the sparks of resistance offered the first glimmer of hope. Somewhere in the depths of rewritten minds, memories waited. And Leon Armitage would find them.